The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Application of the Charter. Article 32. The Charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada in respect of all matters within the authority of Parliament, including all matters relating to Yukon Territories and Northwest Territories. B. To the legislative and government of each province in respect of all matters within the authority of the legislature of Quebec. So Article 32 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms states this, that the Parliament of Canada and the Government of Canada and the legislative provinces, with respect to all the matters, all the laws that they pass, all these laws are stemming from legislation. And it's saying that within the authority of all the legislators. So the Charter is applicable to all matters concerning authority that is coming out of legislation. We see that here? The Charter applies to all matters concerning authority that comes out of legislation, statutes or regulations. So this Charter has to apply. Legislative authority is considered the statutes, the acts, or the regulations that have been given force of law here in Canada. And it says that the Charter shall apply to all these acts and regulations. It's supposed to apply. Canadian Charter of Human Rights, Article 26. The guarantee in this Charter of certain rights and freedoms shall not be construed as denying the existence of any other rights or freedoms that exist in Canada. So continuing on Article 26, it says, these certain rights and freedoms, they're limited, they're quantifiable, you can number them if you will. They cannot deny you of any other right or freedoms that exist in Canada. Now most of us are aware that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that document was drawn up primarily with the help of Canada and of Canadian citizens, and that Canada did indeed sign on to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, the Declaration of Human Rights, the universal one, it grants your human being, your man and woman, much more rights and freedoms than this Charter does here in Canada, much more. And this Charter says that Canada has to acknowledge and has to let you express those rights and freedoms that are existent in Canada that operate outside of this Charter. That's what their law says. So let's say, for example, that I approach the Government of Canada with Article number 26, and I write them a letter and I say, hey, listen, you stripped me of some rights and some freedoms that I have, because this Charter only provides me certain rights and freedoms. But yet in Article 26 of that Charter, it states that if there's any other rights and freedoms that are in existence in Canada, then I have the right to be operating under under that designation, if you will. So I am invoking Article 26 of your Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I am saying to you that there are other rights and freedoms that you are not acknowledging, and your systems are not acknowledging, and are not granting me. So then I would ask Canada, or say to Canada, well, when I jump over to the Universal Declaration of Rights and Freedoms, the one that you guys signed on to, in Article 4 it says that no one shall be held in servitude. And in Article 6 it says there's no obligation to be a juridical person, to be recognized in law as a legal person. Okay, so then explain to me something. If you're claiming in your Charter, Canada, that you indeed recognize that there are other rights, and we jump into the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and start to call on these other rights, then what's the big problem here? You signed on to this. You agreed to this. So when you try to force people to be juridical personalities, public officers, or legal persons under law, you're holding us in servitude. And Article 6 again states, there's no obligation. We have the right to be recognized as a legal person, but no obligation. However, there's certain people in the government that feel that we have the obligation to be recognized as a legal person, and not a right or an option if we choose. So we know and we understand that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms allows us or affords us a certain rights and freedoms in their charter. And we know that the Canadian Charter recognizes that there are other rights and freedoms out there available for us that they don't recognize. Now, in Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms, it states that we are entitled to, or we have the right to food, to water, to housing, to hydro, to medical care, to a standard of living, a decent standard of living, and they even mention clothing. Clothing. Article 25. So the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada offers us certain rights, but if we don't accept those rights, and we ask for these rights, what would happen? If our whole country began to understand, what would happen? So here, the legislative powers in Canada have erected a law that says you have the right to get a credit card at 16 years old. Would you like that right, or would you like these rights? The legislator of Canada has erected a law, a statute, a regulation that says you have a right, your juridical person has a right, and that right is you will pay for hydro. So, would you rather this right, or would you rather these rights? Again, another law that the legislative powers of Canada have erected says that you have a right and a freedom to buy food at the grocery store at a very much inflated price. That's your right. Now you can operate in this right, or you can operate in this right. Which is more beneficial to you? And these legislative powers, the same ones that stripped us of these rights, are the same ones that give the corporations, the big grocery stores, the rights to charge us a lot of money for the food and make it expensive for us to feed us. When we, as human beings, have intrinsic rights, have inalienable rights that are attached to us, as listed here: food, water, housing, hydro, medical care, clothing, and a standard of living that's sufficient, that you don't have to struggle and suffer. This is what the law says in Canada. This is our right here in Canada. I could have made a very long list concerning all the rights and the freedoms that Canada has given us through our juridical personality. However, I think you get the point here. We have actually been stripped of many rights and freedoms here in Canada. We've been robbed of things that are rightfully ours. The law says that every human being has a right to have housing, a right to have a house, to live in a house. But the right that Canada gave you through their charter says that you have a right to go get a mortgage, indebt yourself for the rest of your life, and work hard to pay off that mortgage to a debt account that was created from thin air, where there's no real obligation, where the bank has not put up anything for consideration. But that's the right we give to you, because we love you so much here in Canada, says the lawmaker. Here in Quebec, you will find the exact same operation of law as you see operating in Canada. Quebec Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Article 50. No suppression of right. The Charter shall not be so interpreted as to suppress or limit the enjoyment or exercise of any human right or freedom not mentioned, not indicated, not presented in the Charter. In the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms, which is applicable mostly to a juridical personality, we jump to Article 50. And it says that the Charter itself cannot limit the enjoyment or exercise of any human right or freedom not enumerated herein, not mentioned herein. So the Charter in Quebec, it'll give you certain rights also, but not all your rights, only certain rights. But the Charter will say that whatever right is not mentioned in the Charter itself, you can go and grab that right for yourself. You can go and demand for that right. So if you were to invoke Article 50 and say that this charter and your legislations and your statutes have given me certain rights, but I don't want those rights anymore. I want the rights that are not enumerated herein, that are not written in your charter. And those rights are what I shared with you tonight. There's actually more. I'm just starting to share with you guys, but there's more than that. So for those who are saying that I don't want the charter doesn't apply to me, I agree with you to a certain degree. You don't want the charter, you shouldn't want the charter to apply to you except for that one article. In Quebec, Article 50, and in Canada, Article 25. This way you can bypass the rights that they've given you and go and try and reclaim your human rights, which are yours and are in operation of law, but they're hiding it from us.